Hello, and welcome back to Thecrimereel. This is day 5 of 7 of our 7 continents in 7 days. For today's true crime narration, we shall be visiting South America, a continent made up of 12 countries stretching over 4,700 miles from north to south, ending at Ushuaia in Argentina, the southernmost city in the world. Argentina has a population of around 45 million people, and today we shall be looking more closely at the life of one of these, Carlos Eduardo Robledo Puch. Carlos was born on the 19th of January 1952 in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. He was the only child born to Ada Puch and Jose Robledo. His mother, Ada, was a chemistry graduate who had immigrated to Argentina from Germany. His father, Jose, worked as a technician at General Motors. When Carlos was 4 years old, his family moved to Borges Street in Olivos, Buenos Aires. This deeply religious family lived a comfortable life in an apartment above a hardware store. Carlos was reportedly a shy child who came from a good family. He was well looked after and lived in a safe and loving environment. He was an intelligent boy who was a confident pianist and had a flair for languages, becoming fluent in Spanish, German, and English. Carlos, however, had a problem with authority. He did not like to follow anyone's rules and would often test the authority figures in his life. He grew into a handsome young man with boyish good looks. By 1968, Carlos was living in Tigre, Villa Adelina. At the age of 16, he met Jorge Ibanez. The young men formed a strong friendship and bonded over their mutual dislike of authority. In 1970, they committed their first crime, robbing a jewellery store. It wasn't until almost a year later that their crimes would take a much darker turn. On 15th of March 1971, Carlos and Jorge needed money. They decided to rob a bar in Olivos, Buenos Aires. The two men forced a window and entered the building while the security guard and manager slept inside. They stole around 350,000 pesos, but rather than making a quick getaway, Carlos fired several shots at the two sleeping men. Pedro Mastronardi and Manuel Godoy died instantly. When later asked as to why he had shot the two men, he simply replied, "What did he want me to do? Wake them up?" Just 2 months later, on 9th of May 1971, Carlos and Jorge decided to rob a car parts store in Vicente Lopez. As they searched the premises looking for cash and anything of value, they came across the owners, a young couple with a newborn baby. Carlos fired twice, killing the man and injuring the woman. As the young woman lay injured, Jorge sexually assaulted her. As they were making their way out, Carlos stopped and turned back. The baby was lying in his cot, crying. Carlos took aim and fired directly at the cot before leaving the building. Thankfully, he missed the baby boy who survived his ordeal. Carlos and Jorge stole approximately 400,000 pesos. 15 days later, on 24th of May 1971, the pair robbed a supermarket on Olivos, shooting and killing the security guard. They got away with around 5 million pesos and were apparently so excited by this amount of money that they toasted each other with stolen whiskey over the dead body of the man who they had shot. Following this, on 13th of June 1971, Carlos and Jorge abducted and sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl. They then let the girl go before Carlos shot her 5 times in the back. She died instantly. 11 days after this attack, they repeated this crime in the exact same location, this time abducting, sexually assaulting and killing a 23-year-old woman. Again, this woman was shot in the back as she tried to get away. It is believed that Carlos has started to tire of his partner Jorge and cracks had formed in the pair's relationship. On 5th of August 1971, they were involved in a serious car accident. Carlos ran away without injury, but Jorge died at the scene. Many believe that Carlos, who had been driving the car, had deliberately staged and caused the accident in order to get rid of his accomplice, Jorge. After an apparent short break from criminal activity, Carlos found a new partner in November 1971, 18-year-old Hector Somoza. Within the space of a week, Carlos and Hector robbed a supermarket in Boulogne at gunpoint, then broke into 2 separate car dealerships, stealing over 1 million pesos. On both occasions, they brutally murdered the security guards who were present. After a couple of months where no known robberies or murders took place, on 3rd of February 1972, Carlos and Hector broke into a hardware store. The security guard, Manuel Acevedo, who was 58 years old, was shot and killed. The pair attempted to open the safe with the keys they found on Manuel's body. It is unknown what happened between Carlos and Hector that night. Some believe that Carlos had tired of his second accomplice, while others believe that Hector startled Carlos. But whatever the reason, Carlos shot and killed Hector during the course of the robbery. In order to prevent the body being identified by the authorities, Carlos used a blowtorch, which the pair were using for breaking into the safe, to disfigure Hector. Carlos then fled the scene with the contents of the safe. However, what he had not realised was that Hector had some identification cards in his pocket, which the police used to identify both Hector's body and his accomplice. Carlos was arrested on 4th of February 1972, just 2 weeks after his 20th birthday. Many media outlets struggled to reconcile the fact that this angelic-looking young man had committed such atrocities. Whilst awaiting trial, he was found to be a difficult prisoner. His conduct was poor, his cell unhygienic, and he would often try to manipulate those around him. In 1973, Carlos went to the prison infirmary under the excuse of getting some medicine. Unknown to the guards, he had already set in motion a plan to escape. He had made a rope from braided sheets which had been attached by a hook to the prison wall and, along with an accomplice, attempted to make it out of the prison. Their escape was aided by foggy conditions on that day, which made it more difficult for guards to see what was going on. When the guards spotted the 2 men trying to make their escape, they opened fire. Carlos made it over the wall. His accomplice, however, did not. Carlos was on the run for almost 3 days before he was recaptured and immediately returned to the prison. It wasn't until 1980, 8 years after his arrest, that Carlos's case went to trial. Amongst others, the young woman whose husband had been killed in front of her and whose baby Carlos attempted to shoot testified at the trial. Carlos was convicted of 11 murders, 1 attempted murder, 17 robberies, several counts of sexual assault, 2 kidnappings and 2 thefts. He was sentenced to life in prison and transferred to the high security jail of Sierra Chica near the city of Olivaria. Showing no remorse for his crimes, some of his last words to the court were, "Someday I'm going to get out and kill you all." Carlos was not eligible for parole until July 2000, by which time he was 48 years old. It wasn't until 8 years later, in May 2008, that Carlos made an application to be released. However, when his case was reviewed, along with up-to-date psychiatric and psychological profiles, it was determined that Carlos suffered from psychotic outbreaks and extreme aggressiveness. Parole was denied by the judge on the basis that Carlos was still a threat to society. Additional parole reviews occurred later in 2008 and 2009. Once again, parole was refused. In 2013, Carlos requested a review of his original sentence, or if that was not possible, he asked to be executed by lethal injection. Both of these requests were denied, the latter on the basis that the death penalty is not legal in Argentina. Carlos is still incarcerated in Argentina to this day, and it is believed that he is now in poor health. He has not received any visitors for many years, and it is reported that his only recreational activity is to play chess with other inmates. He is Argentina's longest serving prisoner, having spent over 48 years in prison. His nickname in the press is El Ángel de la Muerte, or in English, Angel of Death. Thanks very much for listening to that story. If you have any comments, please add them down below. As a total change of subject, I mentioned Ushuaia earlier, and on British television on the BBC channel, there has been Race Around the World. They're on their second series. It's a fascinating programme. If you haven't seen it, try and get hold of it. It really is interesting. Series 1 was to travel from Greenwich and they had to get to Singapore and they're not allowed to fly. Season 2 started in Mexico City and they had to get to Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world. So, if you get a chance, Race Around the World, I can highly recommend it. Briefcase told me about this programme. Thanks very much for listening to Thecrimereel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Brian Mulholland from Northern Ireland. He gets his whole family together. Brian Mulholland and his family. Hello to you all. And hello to everyone else. Goodbye.